Ebola is one of the most terrifying viruses on Earth.
This is the biggest health problem facing our world in a generation.
The virus has killed nearly 7,000 people across West Africa so far.
We are not moving fast enough.
Now Britain is leading the fight against Ebola in Sierra Leone, sending a Royal Navy support ship and 3 helicopters, along with more than 1,000 soldiers, scientists and medics.
Cleaning teams sealed up the car Mr. Duncan had used.
But Ebola has jumped continents, with over 20 cases in America and Europe in recent months. There are fears the virus could reach here.
I'm Chris Van Tolliken. I'm a doctor and I specialise in infectious diseases. I'm on the team in London that looks after patients with Ebola. So if you catch it, I could be one of the team members at your bedside.
With no end in sight, this outbreak is raising questions for all of us.
Could Ebola come to Britain? If it did come here, could you catch it? If you did catch it, would you die from it? Well, the truth about Ebola is not always what you'd expect.
This is an insider's guide to Ebola. Britain is on Ebola alert. The world is so connected, the virus could easily be brought here by an airline passenger. So our major airports are on guard. We've screened more than 1,000 people arriving from affected countries in Africa so far. And the health service is rehearsing how to deal with any sign of the virus. To understand why Ebola scares us so much, I've arranged a special meeting. I'm going to come face to face with the virus itself. My destination is this high-security laboratory, where scientists are studying some of the world's most deadly viruses. Porton Down was built during the First World War to develop chemical weapons.
It's no secret that in Britain we have at Porton, in Wiltshire, our own research station to investigate methods of chemical warfare.
Now, there's a public health laboratory too.
Here, in this building, they don't just have Ebola, they actually grow it. So where better to come to understand how and why this virus is so dangerous?
Nicola Cook, one of the scientists here, has agreed to show me the Ebola virus. Security is tight. Nicola's allowing me through the first locked door, but we are still 2 sealed doors away from the virus.
Now, I'm only allowed in this antechamber, aren't I?
Yes, you're completely safe here, but when we go past that door, it is very limited access to there. There's very high security, and I'm afraid you won't be coming with me.
So we're giving Nicola a camera to take us as close as possible to the virus,
Okay,
and a microphone so she can talk to us.
So goodbye to your equipment, and I'll see you on the other side.
All right, cheers, Nicola. This has to be one of the most secure rooms in Britain, and this is why Ebola, Marburg, Lassa, CCHF, these are the most dangerous diseases in the world. And although I can treat patients with these diseases, patients, in fact, they're nowhere near as infectious as when you grow virus in a dish. So you get Ebola in its purest form, and that is what Nicola's working with.
One room closer to the Ebola virus, Nicola changes her clothes and puts on shoes that stay lab-side. Only scientists who are specially trained are allowed to open this last door. Welcome to Ebola's British home. I'm allowed to watch from outside the room. And finally, I get to see what I came for.
And that's Ebola in that flask.
Millions of Ebola virus particles are growing in the liquid.
It's so unremarkable and yet an amazing kind of privilege to see it at the same time. It's really extraordinary. And of course, to you guys, the virus is totally invisible.
Yes.
The Ebola virus is so small it can only be seen using the most powerful electron microscopes. Get close enough and you can see the secret of its success. The virus uses spikes on its surface to get inside our cells.
It replicates very efficiently, Ebola, and it will quite rapidly disseminate throughout the body.
The Ebola virus spreads so quickly that most people's immune systems have no time to fight back. The virus attacks the cells that line blood vessels, so that they become leaky. As blood pressure drops, vital organs like the heart and the liver fail. Death soon follows.
Ebola is a very formidable pathogen.
Ebola scares us because of the way it ruthlessly hijacks our cells and spreads so quickly throughout the body, wreaking havoc. That's the science, but what are the symptoms of Ebola? One British man caught the virus and lived to tell the tale. Will Pooley became infected when he was working as a nurse in Sierra Leone. His symptoms began with a slight sore throat and tiredness.
After a day or two, my temperature went extremely high, uncontrollable, shaking when the temperature was at its highest. A day or two after that, I then started to have diarrhoea. This lasted for a couple of days.
Once he was diagnosed with Ebola, Will was quickly evacuated to Britain, where, fortunately, he recovered.
To know that the virus is in your system, it's frightening. It feels like you're hosting a really malevolent force inside your body.
There's no question Ebola is a terrible disease if you get it. But why is it killing so many people in Africa?
It is really worth hearing from one of the brave people, one of the heroes that's been out there on the ground.
Dr. Javid Abdul-Manem recently worked for Médecins Sans Frontières in one of the few Ebola treatment centres in Sierra Leone. Even as an experienced doctor, he was shocked by what he saw.
In terms of how quickly Ebola can kill, it did surprise me a few times. Well, I remember one young girl came in. She came alone. Don't know where her parents were. She was 8 years old, and she had that characteristic total body pain. She was in agony from just a lot of virus in her system. And I remember the next day I saw her oozing blood from her gums, and the next day she died.
Doctors like Javid have few tools at their disposal when it comes to treating Ebola. Because it's a virus, antibiotics have no effect.
As a doctor, I'm used to managing patients intensively. Investigating, measuring, correcting, giving drugs for cure. There's none of that here. The outcomes were potluck, it felt like.
Many Ebola victims never get medical care. In Sierra Leone, there's just one doctor for every 50,000 people, compared to one for every 350 people here in the UK.
In Britain, if I suddenly went down with a major illness, I go to hospital. Over there, if you're sick, your grandma looks after you, your mother looks after you. They don't have gloves and aprons, they're not healthcare workers.
That's how Ebola started spreading about a year ago, in families caring for those infected. The outbreak began in a remote part of Guinea with the death of 2-year-old Emile Wamuno. Within days, his pregnant mother, sister, and grandmother all died. Then the virus spread to neighbouring villages and beyond.
So imagine a sick child has diarrhoea and vomiting, very common symptoms in Ebola. A mother will look after that child. She might just itch her eye during changing the nappy, and there you've got it. Bang, straight into her eye. And she falls sick. Who will look after her? Her husband or her mother? And it goes through the family that way.
It's spreading so fast because this is one of the poorest regions in the world, and healthcare systems are just too weak to contain the virus. And so Ebola spread from Guinea to neighbouring Liberia, then Sierra Leone. Ebola has killed nearly 7,000 people, and with new cases in Mali, it's still spreading.
We know this virus is deadly in West Africa, but the question is, would it be as deadly here in the UK? Well, to answer that, we need to go and look at the medical care available here.
If you were a confirmed case, you'd be rushed here, the Royal Free Hospital in London. It's the only one in Britain to have a special isolation ward. It's a place I know well because I'm trained to care for patients with the virus here.
So this is the Trexler isolator. This is where you'll be brought if you're unlucky enough to have Ebola or a similar virus in the UK.
The isolator is a tent with its own air supply. It's totally sealed off from the ward.
You might say it's overkill. By the time you're in the tent, though, if you're very ill, there's a huge amount of virus involved. And remember, doctors, nurses are doing things like giving injections, handling feces, handling urine, handling body fluids. And so we do need to take these very extreme measures.
It's crucial to maintain the barrier between the patient and those caring for them at all times.
I'll show you the key bit, really. So there are different systems for looking after patients who have this kind of virus. You can either put on a spacesuit, or you can essentially make the patient wear the suit, so the tent is like a suit. They're completely isolated in there. Put your hands in, and then just like your hands, you put the rest of your body in. So here we go.
So then to treat the patient, we pass things through this port at the end.
Because there's currently no cure for Ebola, the key to beating the virus is your body's own immune system. That means the priority is making sure you're in the best possible shape to fight the disease. So treatment is actually surprisingly basic.
It's one of the mainstays of treatment. It's so simple. It's a bag of salty water. And if people can't drink themselves, this keeps them hydrated, it keeps their kidneys working, it keeps all their basic body functions working. This is the rail the bag hangs from, and then we just run an intravenous line into their veins. And we can treat someone very effectively. They can get up, they can stand here, stretch their legs a little bit, and they can be, a lot of the time patients are conscious and they can look at our beautiful view out the window.
After the British nurse Will Pooley caught Ebola in Sierra Leone, he was successfully treated here in this ward.
Because of the sickness and how disturbing it is to have Ebola, living inside the tent for a week or so wasn't too disturbing, really, because I had other things on my mind. It was quite comfortable, really.
With round-the-clock care and the facilities to treat any complications, a ward like this gives your own immune system the best possible chance to fight the virus. It's a world away from West Africa, where many patients fail to get any medical care.
At the moment in Africa, Ebola's killing something like 7 to 9 out of 10 people it infects. In the UK and in countries like the UK, the death rate is so much lower. We can't really put a number on it, but it might be that more like 7 or 9 out of 10 people survive. It's still an extremely dangerous virus, but simple treatments will be enormously effective in changing the outcome.
We know if you had the virus here, your chances of survival would be much higher than in West Africa. But how likely are you to even catch it in Britain? To answer that, let's look at how Ebola might come here. Every day, around 25 people arrive at Heathrow from the countries in Africa affected by the virus. We know they will be screened, but let's imagine someone slipped through the net. One of them could be carrying the virus in their blood without anyone knowing. It's a scary thought. So could I, or any of us, get Ebola from a stranger.
Imagine I'd just been in Nigeria, and at the airport there, I met a fellow aid worker who told me he'd been in Sierra Leone. He's on the train with me here now, and he isn't looking so well. And he's sweaty, he's coughing. He just sneezed. Could this be the first signs of Ebola? And if it is, could I catch it?
It all hinges on the type of virus Ebola is. Some viruses, like flu, are airborne. They spread easily from person to person. When you sneeze, you send thousands of these virus particles into the air. They can then be inhaled by someone else.
But Ebola is different because it has to be transmitted through bodily fluids, so blood, vomit, feces, even saliva. But crucially, you don't have much virus in any of these fluids until you're really sick.
So to catch Ebola, you have to exchange bodily fluids with a person who has the disease. And unlike the flu, you can only catch it when an infected person already has symptoms. They're not ill, they're not contagious. Let's imagine the sick stranger from the plane came this way. Could he be spreading Ebola as he goes?
So let's imagine I sit down at this bench and he's next to me and he sneezes in my face.
In this case, sneezing could be dangerous because it might involve exposure to bodily fluids if his saliva got in my eyes or mouth.
Well, that is, in theory, a way of me getting the virus because it could get into my eyes or into my mouth. But if you think about it, a number of different things have to kind of come together to make that a realistic proposition. For a start, they have to be really ill to have virus in their saliva. Probably too ill to be sitting in a train station. Secondly, remember, I have got an immune system in my eyes and in my mouth. Even if they have it, I'm not necessarily going to get the virus. And the third thing is, when has anyone ever sneezed in your face? I don't think it's ever happened to me. I'm a doctor. I spend all day with sick people. Could I get it from the handle of this trolley? Well, I'm going to be honest, this is not a virus that lives well on the handles of luggage trolleys. But let's say I took the luggage trolley while the handle was still warm and covered in sweat. Well, again, we don't know that this virus lives in sweat. But let's say it is in sweat, and let's say I grab the handle covered in sweat and it's still warm. Could I get it then? Well, no, because my hands are covered in sweat, my own sweat, and proteins and enzymes that are actually antiviral.
Unless you had cuts on your hands, touching someone else's sweat doesn't mean the virus would get inside your body.
I'm not going to get it, and nor are you.
Some people have even asked me about catching Ebola from toilet seats.
So, the reason that you're unlikely to catch Ebola from a public toilet is exactly the same reason you're unlikely to catch anything from a public toilet, no matter how clean they are. There are some bits of the world that we all instinctively regard as contaminated, and so we have a strong aversion to touching them. And if we do touch them, we thoroughly wash ourselves. I mean, come on, really? Catching things off public toilet seats? I don't think so.
The reassuring truth is that it's actually quite hard to catch Ebola, much harder than the flu or a common cold. So even if it comes to Britain, the chances of the virus spreading are minimal. Anyone who's ill would be isolated in hospital very quickly. But that doesn't mean we shouldn't worry at all about Ebola.
I don't think Ebola is going to spread in the UK. I don't think you're going to catch this virus. I don't even think I'm going to catch this virus. And I'm one of the people who might be looking after the very sickest patients. But as well as being a doctor, I also work in a lab. And I work with someone who is worried. And I want to go and find out why.
In this unlikely place, Professor Greg Towers wants to show me something that reveals what might happen to the Ebola virus the longer this outbreak continues.
It's fantastic, isn't it? Check out this tremendous diversity.
The Grant Museum is crammed full of the richness of life in all its variety. All these different species have come about through evolution.
It's going to be.
Evolution affects viruses as well as animals.
So we can get a sense of the diversity that evolution can generate looking at these butterflies. So you can see how different that they can become. They've got all these different colours. These butterflies have evolved to be different, all from an original single butterfly, a single common ancestor. We've even got some moths down here that have evolved to look like different things. So here we have.
I swear these were bees, wasps,
and these hornets, but they're all moths. So they can evolve to look like something different because it advantages them to look like a bee or a hornet because things stay away from them. And so that gives them an advantage.
Just as animals adapt themselves to better survive, so too do viruses like Ebola.
In the same way that there's this tremendous diversity of species, there's a tremendous diversity of viruses. And viruses, like these different animals, they also are going to evolve.
This virus was first identified in 1976, when it killed 280 people near the Ebola River in the Democratic Republic of Congo. It's thought the virus jumped from animals to humans.
So here is a fruit bat. We think that a fruit bat very much like this may be the source of Ebola.
Having left the animal world and entered the human environment, the virus might now adapt itself to us. Evolution happens as the virus spreads. As it replicates, mistakes creep in. If these mistakes improve the chances of transmitting between people, the virus will keep them. So how might the current Ebola virus change?
We're pretty confident that it's not going to become airborne. Everything about Ebola means that it transmits in a particular way through bodily secretions. In order to become airborne, it would have to change every feature of its entire capacity. And so it can't do that. It's not going to change into a different type of virus in the same way that a dog won't evolve into a cat.
So you think it won't become airborne, so that's very reassuring.
That's reassuring, yes. But this isn't something that we want to be complacent about. It could become better at transmitting.
As we've seen, the Ebola virus infects by using spikes on its surface to enter our cells. But the virus could change to enter cells even more efficiently.
So the virus could get into our cells better and maybe evade our immune system better.
That's right, so it could get into the cells in a more efficient way. And of course, we have this fantastically well-evolved defensive system that protects us from the vast majority of viruses. It's not protecting us from Ebola at the moment, but the virus could adapt to become even better at evading those defences. And in that way, that'll help it transmit better.
Currently, people with Ebola can't pass the virus on if they're not obviously sick, but that could change.
You can imagine a scenario where people are less ill and therefore less visibly have the virus, and that would obviously be a bad thing, because that would mean that you could possibly catch the virus from somebody that is not displaying symptoms.
I guess I started this feeling confident that we were going to get this under control. I think I feel a bit more concerned now. Are you worried?
I think we should be worried. I don't think we should panic. This is something we need to sort out, and we need to sort it out by stopping it from transmitting from one person to another so that it remains a virus which transmits at the rate it transmits, which is bad enough as it is.
With every new infection in West Africa, we give Ebola a chance to evolve, to change. And we have no idea what direction that change will go in. But I think there's a good bet it will become easier to catch. And that means it can infect more people. And the only way we can stop this virus evolving is to stop it spreading in West Africa.
So how do we stop Ebola spreading? One way we normally hold viruses in check is with drugs. But the only treatment that's been given for Ebola is untested, and the supply has run out. So scientists have also turned their attention to vaccines. In Oxford, there are hopes a new one could help stop the virus in its tracks. Matilda Munro is the last of 60 volunteers here to be given an experimental Ebola vaccine. This is science happening at high speed.
These days, developing a new vaccine can take anything from 10 to 15 years. Here we're trying to do this in months, not in years. We're trying to take a vaccine so rapidly through the clinical development program that it's actually available to use to help control an outbreak before that outbreak is over. That has never happened before.
The vaccine works by taking the gene responsible for creating the spikes on the surface of Ebola and putting it into a harmless virus, which is then injected into the patient.
One
When we vaccinate people with the carrier and the small part of the Ebola virus, you get an immune response against the carrier, as expected, but also against the Ebola spike protein. And that is critical in protecting you against Ebola.
If this trial shows the vaccine is safe, it'll be tested in West Africa early next year to see if it works. It's likely to be made available to healthcare workers first.
By preventing disease in healthcare workers, you not only protect that very vulnerable group, but you also help prevent transmission from patients to healthcare workers to the community. There actually isn't vaccine to immunize the whole of those 3 countries. That would be tens of millions of doses. We don't have that number yet. We might do in a year or so. But with tens of thousands of doses correctly deployed or optimally deployed, you should be able to make a significant impact on the epidemic.
However useful this vaccine and others being tested might turn out to be, we can't afford to wait for them to be ready. I want to show you what's being done to fight Ebola right now.
A freezing airport in the East Midlands may seem like an odd place to come to talk about deadly tropical virus epidemics, but in fact this location is at the front line of the UK's response to Ebola.
These crates are part of the £230 million the UK is spending in Sierra Leone. Gareth Walker works for Doctors of the World, one of the charities who've been asked to help by the UK government.
There's a flight going out every 48 hours or so. This one has got a lot of lab equipment on it, which is going to be part of a response which is more than tripling the lab capacity which is in Sierra Leone.
Along with labs to diagnose patients, Britain is building 6 new treatment centres and providing 700 beds. The first centre opened last month. Britain is sending people too. 1,000 NHS workers have volunteered. The first 30 have been trained and flew out last month.
The aim is to get this Ebola outbreak under control, I think, within 6 months. If it gets beyond 6 months and we haven't got it under control, then it's going to be extremely difficult to deal with.
What's happened in Liberia suggests these kind of efforts can help beat Ebola.
I'm very optimistic, actually. In Liberia, the scale-up of infection control measures, the beds, etc., has been a little bit quicker than in Sierra Leone. And we're already seeing that infection rate in parts of Liberia coming down. So I'm quite confident that this is a strategy that will work.
The race to beat Ebola is a race against time, and we are really, really late starters. We have to stop this virus. We have to stop it killing more people. And we have to stop it having the opportunity to become even more dangerous than it already is.
But even if we beat Ebola this time, we need to be vigilant for the next outbreak. Viruses like Ebola will emerge again and again, and they could come here. In our connected world, we need to remember that the health of the poorest people in places like West Africa can affect the health of every single one of us.